Hello, hello. My name is Michelle Drew, and I'm your host here on From a Mess to a Message, where I interview inspiring people who have gone through a messy time in their life and they've come through to the other side with a message of hope and inspiration for the listeners. So today's guest is Sherri Kirk. She's a self-integration guide, and I'm going to let her give you, kind of what that means, and how she helps people with that. So Sherri, thank you so much for agreeing to share your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet, you bet. So let's dive right in. Can you take us back to a messy time in your life, a time that things were not oh so perfect, and walk us through that time and kind of, what was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So back when I would say that I was asleep in my human journey,
Mm.
I thought my life was pretty perfect. I was married. I got married in 2015, and I had a surface, great life, great relationship. I, at the time, practiced a lot of external control. So I had all of my life together in an outward standpoint. And then in November of 2018, my husband at the time came to me and said that he wasn't happy. And I was like, okay, so what does this look like? Are we okay? And he told me that that was something that he was exploring. And at that moment, I don't know any other way to say it besides it felt like the floor came out from under me and I fell through it. And I was kind of just in this portal of almost nothingness for a while where I was like, how is it possible that this morning I woke up and my life was perfect? And I'm going to go to bed and this one person, which at the time I had basically poured my entire self into this other person,
Yeah.
is telling me that he's not happy. Um, it was a very interesting situation for me because it was more that we almost had a parent child relationship. And it wasn't something that I realized at the time, but it wasn't like there was cheating or there was something astronomical that happened outwardly. And again, my whole world was outwardly. So
Mm.
there were lots of things that I could have done differently that I didn't see that were in my unconscious thoughts that he had asked me to work on, that he had told me were an issue. And because of the way my life had played out until that point, I didn't see these red flags in myself, really. So for about a year, we tried to work on things. And I think what was really happening is both of us were still trying to work on outward things. We were trying to work on what each other was doing or was not doing, and
Mm.
not really focusing on who we were being,
Being.
what version of ourselves we were choosing. And we were trying to fix problems instead of maybe coming back to what made it work in the first place, and kind of starting from there, or maybe starting from a place where we could start over. We were trying to repair, almost like go back to a time before this thing happened. And of course, now that I've done so much work, you can't necessarily go back to what happened or where you were before the trauma or before an event. You have to reinvent yourself and you have to become the version of you that exists after that.
Right, right.
So yeah, so for a year, he had moved out, he moved back in. We tried to work on things, we tried to go to marriage counseling. Um, and also, I will be totally transparent. At the time, I didn't think that there was anything going on with me. I thought it was all
Mm.
him and his emotional crisis and
Yeah.
him going through this thing that I couldn't control and I didn't have any part in. It felt very
Mm.
separate from me. It felt very, he has to figure out his stuff. And then when
Yeah.
he does that, we will be okay. Of course, I went to therapy. I took my first energy course when I was going through that. And that was all great. However, like I said, it still felt separate.
Yeah.
I didn't really feel the connectedness. I didn't feel the pieces that I was contributing to
Right.
what was happening. Um, and it actually wasn't even until he moved out, we separated. And for a while, I thought I was just going to wait for him. And which was so interesting where I am now, like thinking I'm just going to wait and not do anything with myself. I was
Mm.
just gonna see what happened with him. And then it was probably a full year after we were initially separated that I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't just stay on hold.
Right.
And I ended up being the one to file for divorce because I knew something had to happen. At that point, I had kind of gotten to a place in my journey where I was it's almost like you have to be tired of your own crap to make moves sometimes.
Yes.
And I had gone so far down the rabbit hole of being miserable for so long.
Mm.
And it's almost like I got to a point where I didn't have any more grieving left in me. I had one thing that was my saving grace is I was great at talking to people about what was happening inside of me. So my friends, my family knew what was going on. And then at one point, I remember I was in the car with one of my best friends, and I said, "I think I'm going to do it. I'm gonna tell John that I want to talk about finalizing things." And she was like right now, like on our way to Home Goods. And I was like, "Yep, right now. I need to do it right now."
Wow.
And so I actually sent him a text and said I wanted to meet up to talk about finalizing things. And I think it was kind of the first time where I hadn't closed the chapter yet, but I
Mm.
really felt like I was flipping some pages to get to chapters that I actually wanted to start reading again.
Yeah. I love
Um,
how you put that.
Thank you. And yeah, I just was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep rereading the tear-soaked pages of this chapter.
Right.
And I need to do something else.
Yeah. And I love how you say, because I think so many people do it, and I've done a lot of work myself, and you start to realize that everything in your life is a result of a choice that you made. It's not them, it's not him,
Oh,
it's not her,
it
it's
is.
not out there.
Yes, it's so important. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that other people, and I mean, I'm very soul oriented. I started off saying that I was a soul coach, and at my core, that's what I still am. And I think that connecting to the spiritual realm,
Mm.
it's beautiful because you feel connected, you feel the oneness, you feel all of that. And then there's this piece where, okay, now I have to start taking responsibility for all of my stuff
Yeah.
because these other people are also me. That's how I see it. And they're
Yeah.
mirroring me. So,
Right.
yes, perhaps they're on my journey. Maybe part of their soul plan is to show me things that are uncomfortable and things that I don't want to look
Yeah.
at. And they're going through their own thing
Mhm.
separately. But the basis is we are not separate. We are all part of this whole. And we're
Yeah.
all showing each other what we need, which is
Mhm.
not necessarily what we feel like we want at the time.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And it's like I watch a lot of near death experience stories, and you hear that message over and over
Mm,
and over again, that we are one. We're a big, beautiful tapestry.
yes.
And that's amazing.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved in, so you started with baby steps when you were going through that time, and now,
Mm.
from what I understand, you've gone full circle and
Yeah. So for it was interesting because for a while after that, I was still in a corporate job, which I still am in a corporate job currently. Um, but it's almost like I went through that divorce. I was in another relationship that ended, and I was realizing that I was throwing myself, my full self, into other people.
Mm,
And I don't even think I knew at the time what was happening or what that looked like or what that meant.
mm,
And I started looking into ways that I was going to spend my time that were more meaningful, my
mm,
whole time. And that's something that I so deeply respect now is we all have this ticking clock and we
Yeah.
have no idea how much time we have left.
Right.
And
Right.
it was also interesting. I had a tarot reading a few years back, and the reader was like, "Oh, you're a Sagittarius, so your job must be very meaningful to you." And I was like, my job's it's a 9 to 5. I clock in, I clock out, and then I live my life outside of that. And she was like, "Huh, interesting." And so fast forward a couple years later, I'm like, I am really spending 40 hours every week clocking in and clocking out and essentially dissociating during that time. Where is that time going? Where is that consciousness going? And so I started looking into what it would mean for me if I integrated soul work into a career.
Mm.
And I did every Google search imaginable, soul careers, like side gigs, all these things. And I kept coming back to life coaching.
Mm.
And when I first started looking at it, I was like, I don't know, is coaching really my thing? Is this really want to go? And then I started seeing soul coaching as
Mm.
sort of another piece of that.
Yeah.
And every time I came back to something with physical objects in the spiritual realm, like I love crystals, tarot cards, things like that. But I think I've always known innately that we have our wholeness and we
Mm.
have everything inside of us already. And there was a person that I heard on Hay House Radio at one point, and she doesn't use anything outside of her for her practice. And I think that sometimes hearing people that are already professional in the field almost give you permission to say, oh, it's okay to do this.
Yes. Yes.
So my whole message was about, like, when people ask me, like, what modalities do you use for coaching? And I'm like, it's really just about tapping into the energy of another person and mirroring back to them questions that they wouldn't think to ask themselves. Maybe because there are unconscious blocks that don't even allow them to ask those questions.
Right.
Maybe because it's things that they haven't even put together, like you said, in this tapestry of their life that's all connected, that they might not even think that pieces are related, and they're all related. They're
Yeah.
all connected. Our soul plan is a bunch of pins on a map of places we may or may not reach in this lifetime, to me.
Mm.
And then of course it was so interesting because I had talked to a few coaches to find out about their journey, and then I talked to one of my best friends who was just like, "Oh, one of my friends is a coach. You should probably talk to her." And I immediately called her, had a conversation with her, talked to her about her program, immediately knew that she was a great fit for me, of someone to work with. And I just decided that I was going to do it. And
Yeah.
at the time, my boyfriend is a charter captain. He just started living his dream of being a tuna charter captain.
Wow.
And I think that starting to date him really showed me, okay, so this is what it looks like to entertain living your dream. What would
Mm.
that look like for me? And then that's really what gave me the push to be like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm signing up for one-on-one mentorship.
Yeah.
I'm going to see what this looks like. And I think for me too, it took someone else believing in me as to this is something that could actually be feasible as a career,
Yes.
rather than I think what I had experienced previously, which I have amazing friends and family. And
Good.
a lot of times other people are mirroring your egoic need for safety.
Mm-hmm.
So most of my life, I was taught you go to school, okay, check. You get good grades, awesome, A plus in everything. You go to college, okay, what do I want to go for? Oh, it doesn't really matter. Just go for business and you'll be fine. Cool. Went for business, got two different corporate jobs. And I'm like, okay, so this is what the American dream looks like.
Right. Right.
And am I missing something? Is there something I'm not incorporating? And I think what I find and what I find with a lot of other people too is often it's not what we need to add. It's what we need to take away
Right.
to
Yeah.
make space for what we actually want.
Right.
Because how many of us actually think about what we want, us? And yes, we're all connected. It's this
Mm.
beautiful connection of humans and beings, animals,
Yeah.
plants, all of that.
Yeah.
However, we all have the responsibility to make ourselves happy.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the most beautiful things that I've heard recently is whatever is in your cup is what you're going to spill onto other people.
Ooh.
So it's not necessarily you have to fill your cup. What are you filling your cup with?
Yeah.
Because if you're filling your cup with resentment, if you're filling your cup with anger that you're doing something and you don't have room for your needs,
Yeah.
if everything is energy, which I believe it is,
Yes.
the energy that's in your cup, that's what you're spilling onto other people. So if you're helping other people constantly with complete disregard for yourself and you think you're contributing positively to them,
Yeah.
you're charging them with negative ions. So you're not actually helping them when you think they are.
Right.
And to add to that, some often we help people by fishing for them rather than teaching
Yeah.
them how to fish. And then we become their guru. And instead of them learning how to trust themselves, them learning who they actually are, learning to be authentic, learning what they actually want, they end up coming to you for all of their decision making or all of their trust comes from you or an outside source.
And a lot of times, don't you find that you end up resenting it?
Absolutely. And that's the other thing. If you and one of my mentors talks to me all the time about opening up this two-way street, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm absolutely a recovering people pleaser, perfectionist, all of those things. And I probably always will be in recovery because those parts of me are always going to exist inside of me.
Yeah.
And for all of us, I think I had a hard time with letting go for a while because I am so acutely aware of whatever you're letting go is still there. It's still out there somewhere.
Mm.
But it's more of alchemizing and transmuting the feelings that you have about events so that you can transform them into something else. And instead of being triggered by them,
Yeah.
it can accept them, figure out what they have to teach you, figure out if you want to essentially keep telling the same stories or if you want to change the stories, edit them, or maybe just stop telling them completely.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. And it's like you said something a little earlier about changing the questions you ask yourself. It's all about questions. It's like
Yes,
instead of telling ourselves something, ask the question.
absolutely.
How did I contribute to this situation? What could I have done
Mhm.
differently? Not like, oh,
Yes.
poor me. They did that to me. They're
Hmm.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
but
I
that's
think,
human nature.
right. And I do think sometimes you have to sit with it.
Yeah.
One of my therapist, one time I was in a session with her, this was pretty soon after my separation. And I was in a place I had finally realized, I didn't know what to do about it yet, but I had finally realized that was I'm not I don't want to use at fault or to blame for
Right.
my
Right.
separation, but I had some pieces
Yeah.
in it as well.
Yeah.
So I was sitting there and I was just shaming myself for it and I was saying, "Oh, he's sensitive and he's this and I couldn't be what he needed me to be and therefore this is my fault."
Oh boy.
And I was just stuck in that loop. And it had probably been a couple sessions that I was there just crying, feeling sorry for myself, which one does if major life events happen
Yeah.
and they feel, looking back, there were signs. At the time, I felt very blindsided by the whole situation. And my therapist, I remember she was in Rhode Island. So I drove probably like a half hour to go see her. We were talking for a while. She tried to help me through one of these episodes. And I probably had 15 minutes left in my session. And she was just like, okay, I'm going to let you sit here. We're done for today because she recognized that I think that we have, like I said, you have to be tired of your own crap.
Yeah.
You have to actually want something different for yourself than where you're at. And I was so attached and connected to
Mm,
just feeling sorry for myself. I
yes.
had absolutely no desire at the time to pull myself out of that. So if I don't want to pull myself out of
Yeah.
that, she's not going to be able to pull me out of that.
So
And
true.
she's amazing. And she knew that. And so it was almost like I felt like a child who was throwing a tantrum, and my mom was just letting me do it and
Yeah.
just saying, okay, be here,
Yeah.
enjoy this almost like reveling in discomfort.
Yes.
um
Yes.
and she's like, we'll pick up next time. And I was almost just like, what do you mean? You don't want to help me, you don't want to pull me out of this? But I drove home being like, that was the most loving thing she could have possibly done for me,
Yeah.
is just let me be in my stuff and
Yeah.
let me feel it
Yeah.
completely without telling me
Yeah.
it's not okay that you're here. You need to be somewhere else.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that that's huge, because before we can, and to your point too, before we can start taking real responsibility, which real responsibility I feel like for things leads to change, and it
Mhm.
leads to updating cycles or breaking cycles and choosing something different.
Yeah.
It's almost like you have to ask the questions as to why you're here in the first place, what led
Mhm.
you here, what factors.
Yeah.
And I think there's a fine line between coaching and therapy. And I think what it really comes down to is, in coaching, and you're pulling everything into the present.
Yes.
We're not necessarily going back
Yeah.
to relive things that have happened to the past. It's more adding neutrality and pulling out pieces for the fact-based information that exists rather
Yeah.
than how you feel about it and the story around it.
Yeah.
And
So
then
true.
planning for the future, remaining in the present and remembering that the present moment is truly all you have.
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle was the first person who that really drove home for
Yeah.
me in his work.
Yes.
And we can't spend too much time in either the perceived past or present. I'm sorry, perceived
Future.
past or future,
Yeah.
because then we really are missing out on the present.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that that's really what coaching comes down to, is saying, okay, in my present state, in my
Mm.
present being, in the knowledge that I presently have, and all the wisdom that I've accumulated since that event that happened at some point,
Yeah.
what have I learned from it? How can if we can't always think about it as positively yet, because
Right.
let's be honest, sometimes if you're doing that, you're not being authentic because it
Right.
still hurts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's more of making it neutral first to me.
Mm.
And then when you can do that, then you can maybe start to see how it's connected in the tapestry, or a lot of times I'll say the patchwork quilt of your life,
Yes.
where we have all these patches and they have different colors and textures, and they're sewn together in different ways. Maybe it's a little jagged, maybe um it flows a little bit better. But
Yeah.
we have to see how all of these things are connected from
Yeah.
a neutral, almost bird's eye view of our lives.
Yeah.
And then when we can do that, we can see the beauty in it. We can see what we've learned from things. We can also see why other people do what they do.
Mm.
Because when you love, or at least accept, all of the versions of you,
Mm.
you can match that to the versions of other people that they're showing you.
Yes.
There are infinite ones that you can
Right.
choose from.
Right.
And if we can give ourselves grace and learn from our different versions,
Mhm.
we can do that with other people, and we can help them do that for themselves. And then there's a ripple effect
Yeah.
through space and time, where
Yeah.
they can then take that information, and instead of taking things personally, instead of thinking that people are attacking them, realizing that if other people are showing versions of themselves that are slightly unsavory, they're probably in survival mode. They are
Mhm.
probably doing the best they can.
Yeah.
They are probably trying to keep their head above water.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that has been the single most important thing in my journey, is really realizing that.
Yeah.
And if we do have view of oneness, if we
Mhm.
can get to the point where we can see the whole universe as us,
Yeah.
we're seeing each human as an appendage of us.
Yeah.
And seeing how the journeys fit together, seeing why maybe they have to go through a journey that you don't understand
Mhm.
because you haven't lived the life events that they have.
Right. Right.
And knowing that our experiences and the way that we've chosen, like you said, to
Yeah.
experience this lifetime as this human in this meat suit,
Yeah. Yeah.
that is the way we integrate ourselves
Yeah.
with all of the different versions of us, all of the paradoxical and things and duality with ourselves. And
Mm.
then we can start to understand the world and understand other people and
Yeah.
understand how they relate to this big, wide universe.
Yes. Yes. So good. So good. So fast forward to what does life look like now? I heard that you have a new man in your life, which is
I do.
fantastic.
Yes.
And yes, so how does life look now?
Yeah. So I think with uh, self integration,
Mhm.
there's a lot of detachment that's needed. And I think detachment for me has been one of the most challenging things to describe because it can sound cold. It can sound like you're detaching from life, like you're not connected to life.
Mhm.
And in fact, I think it's the exact opposite. I think that when we detach from situations, when we detach from other people and other beings and other outcomes, we can actually connect with them more.
Mm.
And the other thing is, we're helping other people detach from us in a healthy way. Because to me, attachment is more of, I need this other person to feel whole, to
Mm.
feel like I'm okay. I need this person to tell me I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
And what it really comes down to is each individual person feeling whole.
Mm.
And then when we can feel whole as an individual, then we can teach other people to feel whole. And then it's almost like if the world or the universe is whole, of course it is whole. It's
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
And it's only going to be as feel as whole as the sum of its parts. So if each individual person doesn't feel whole, what's that going to do to the wholeness of the universe?
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I think the biggest thing for me is life looks like, I know that it's like I can do whatever I want at all
Yeah.
times. It's this crazy realization of I can say no to things, I can say yes to things, and I'm not doing it to upset other people. I'm
Mhm.
actually mostly doing it to give other people permission to live their own truth and
Mm.
to live life the way they want to.
Right.
Years ago, it used to be basically that I was just a blind yes person.
Yeah.
If somebody that I loved and cared about asked me to do something, I didn't even stop to query my soul to ask if it was something that aligned with me.
Yeah.
I would just say yes
Yeah.
because I loved the person. Of course, I want to spend time with this person. And then sometimes I'd find myself in situations where, yes, I like being with that person, but I don't like doing that thing. Or
Yeah.
I actually really needed to recharge that day and I had no idea how to tell someone that
Right.
I needed to cancel. And I also came across this situation where I always felt like I had to give a good enough answer as to why I don't want to do something.
Yes, I learned
And
that from Oprah. No is a complete sentence.
yes, it's so true. And I think that that's a huge piece of my message. And also, I mean, I think we could all use a de-industrial revolution. That's something that I talk about a lot, and I am a firm advocate for reducing urgency culture
Mm.
because I think that's another big one.
Yeah.
Is when you really start slowing down,
Mhm.
that's probably the first step.
Yeah.
And when I talk to anyone about what they want, what they don't want, the first step is in slowing down.
Mhm.
And it's almost like you have to sometimes put yourself in this bubble
Right.
where the world is just happening around you. and you have to just watch it
Yeah.
and remember that you don't have to engage.
Right.
You don't have to. And it's almost like you have to start removing things from your life and
Hmm.
start saying no and start letting things pass you by without fear of missing out.
Right.
And then when you start doing that, you start realizing, oh, the sky's not falling. I'm still here. I'm still okay. I'm still safe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not until you do that. And there are actually some times where I realize that I have removed so much from my life that I'm like, okay, now I have to start thinking about what I want to add in.
Yeah. But do it because
And
you want to add that in.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. So I feel like my biggest problem now is discerning what I want to say yes to,
Mm.
because I think it was very needed that I now leave a lot of space for myself to just
Yeah.
be.
Hmm.
Most of my life, I was way more comfortable in my masculine, and moving into my divine feminine that is okay with just
Yeah.
being, doesn't need to do all the time, can rest, can listen to the birds,
Mm.
can sit out in nature, can take a walk, just feeling my connection to the trees.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something I never would have imagined doing years ago. That felt like it was a waste of time. And now I feel like the wastes of time are doing things that I know insult my soul that I
Yeah.
was doing anyway,
Yeah.
because I didn't even stop to think if it was something I actually wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So,
important. So
so yeah,
important.
so I think
Yeah.
that the biggest change is I deeply love my friends and my family and all of the new beautiful people that I've met on this journey. And it's so true that when you decide to change and you tell the universe you want to move in a certain direction, people just start popping out of the woodwork to help you
I know. It's
on your
crazy.
journey. And people sometimes fade away, but I think that the biggest part of detachment is universal freedom.
Mm.
It's freedom for you to do what you want to do,
Yeah.
freedom for other people to do what they want to do. And the best part is if somebody chooses to leave your life, you don't have to take it personally.
Right.
You
Right.
can you can say, I'm so glad that you found something that lights you up,
Yeah.
and it thank you for spending the time with me on your journey that you did.
Yeah.
And if our and the other thing is, the only thing that's permanent is change.
Hmm. Go
Change is
figure,
always going to
right?
happen. So
Yeah.
it's almost when you let go and you just allow the world to move around you, and you just choose what's in your control, which is how you're spending your life energy.
Yes.
And
Yes.
instead of begging other people to stay, letting them go on their way
Yeah.
and finding your path. And then who knows, if they're meant to be in your life again, then your paths are going to cross again.
Right.
I always hear in literature that I've read, like Many Lives, Many Masters is one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
And there are a couple other spiritual books where they talk about your soul's plan as looking sort of like a chessboard.
Mm.
And to me, what that feels like is there's corners and sides, and you're walking on this chessboard, and someone else is maybe walking on the chessboard somewhere else.
Mm.
And you may or may not meet at one of those corners. And if you do, then that's great. And if you don't, and to me, spirituality means there are many lives for you to
Hmm.
experience.
Yeah.
And if you're living this one to its fullest capacity with what you have, which is all you need,
Hmm.
and what you know, and with the beautiful goal of just learning and
Yeah.
loving,
Yeah.
it's always going to bring you where you need to be, even
Yeah.
if it looks scary, even if the fog rolls in and you can't see the step in front of you anymore.
Right. Right.
It's just a flow state.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I don't ever want to tell anyone how they should feel, how they should think, how they should
Right.
heal, how they should grow.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that what everyone really wants is freedom,
Mhm.
is a flow state,
Yeah.
is living knowing that they're enough for themselves and enjoying the company of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. We've gotten
Interest,
so far away from that.
yes. And introspection was something that I never thought I would enjoy before.
Wow.
When I first started therapy sessions after my separation, I had to constantly be with people. I couldn't be by
Yeah.
myself. I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I had entered another relationship for almost a year. And then
Mm,
it wasn't until after that I was like, I'm gonna take some time for myself.
good.
And I
Yeah.
took a year where I didn't date anyone.
Yeah.
I pretty much just took walks every day. I
Yeah.
connected with myself. I connected with the universal energy of nature.
Yeah.
And my current boyfriend, I actually knew him in middle school, and I didn't think that I was ready to start dating again, honestly. And we were literally at Turk Seafood in Mattapoisett, and some little kid banged on the glass in between where he was sitting and I was sitting. And we both like looked up and saw each other. And the entire time I kept asking the universe for a signier sign that I was supposed to reach out to him. And then Facebook told me it was his birthday the next day. And I was like, all right,
Oh
cool. I guess
my.
this is happening.
Wow. I love those types of things. And so many
Yes.
people are not aware of them, those serendipitous
No.
things
Yes.
that happen that they're just meant to
Yes.
be. Yeah.
And I'm so blessed with the teachers that I've had on this path. And one of my mentors is huge into Jungian studies and looking for signs and synchronicities. And it's almost like you have to decide that that's going to be your goal, is
Mm,
just to notice those
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And then when you do, the universe brings you more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
funnier about it. It's just a lot more. Okay, this could be a sign, turns into, oh my gosh, this is an
Right. Like,
undeniable sign. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
like you say, it literally like knocks you on the forehead, like, hello,
Right.
this was
Right.
right in front of your face the whole time.
So good.
Um,
So good.
but yeah, just noticing those things, and also
Yeah.
not taking those things seriously.
Right.
Just
Right.
taking the signs and symbols as something else to think about on your path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you don't even have to work through anything until you're ready.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So, what would you like to leave the audience with as far as a message of hope and inspiration?
So I think what I would leave the audience with is that self integration, to me, is the most efficient way to really get to know yourself,
Mm,
and to get to know yourself on a personal level,
mm,
and to really connect with source.
yeah.
So once again, Carl Jung is all about your different archetypes, which are
Yeah.
the different versions of you, the different ways that you express yourself to the world.
Yeah.
And I think that the term of letting go is
Hmm.
something that we think about as, you have to let go of like a whole piece of you, or you have to let
Yeah.
go of a situation so that it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's what we're supposed to do.
Right.
I think that self-integration for me is my passion, because it's about allowing all of the versions of you to be friends,
Mm,
so they can work together, and then
right.
they can work with your self with a capital S, which
Yeah.
is the whole universe and everyone else.
Yeah. So, where can
Um,
people find you on social media?
so on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, I also have a TikTok. It's Moonlight Soul Tuning is my business name.
Perfect.
And I also have a website, moonlightsoultuning.com. So it's
Perfect. And I'll
all
drop all
connected
that into the
there as well.
notes. I'll drop it all
Amazing.
into the notes too. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you very
And
much. This was
yeah,
amazing.
yes, it was so fun. So fun. You're so inspiring and it's good
I appreciate
information.
that.
Yeah,
You
thank
too.
you.